Kyo was a city of many streets, some of them more quiet and isolated than others. Aburano Koji was one of these, and it was where Nagakura, Harada, and I hid with the rest of the men assigned to this task. We set out Ito's corpse as bait to draw the guard into a trap. My teeth bit into my lips so hard I had to stop before I drew blood. If Ito had been allowed to live, he would have been a danger to the Shinsengumi. I understood that. But this, it just seems... Is this something that could be forgiven? Yeah. Whatever I might think of what we were about to do, this was my only chance to save Heisuke. I couldn't look away. We sat there for... I wasn't sure how long, until finally we heard the sounds of the guard approaching. Six or seven of them rushed forward to examine Ito's corpse. Among them, of course. He hadn't noticed us yet, but the tacked and downcast boy I saw in the street was nothing like the Heisuke I'd known. Harada and Nagakura picked him out at the same moment I did. Suddenly, they both closed their eyes for a moment in silent prayer. Heisuke was drowned out by the cry of Miki, who in turn was interrupted by the sudden report of a gunshot. If he was hesitating, then it hadn't been the Guardians who'd fired? Was it the Shinsengumi? Oi! Itai, doko no baka ga uchagatta? Doko no baka to wa tsurane na. せっかくこの俺様が相手をしに来てやろうと思ったのによ。知らない？アマキリ？おい、どうしてお前らがここにいるんだよ。なんでってな、仕事だよ、仕事。頭の悪いお前らと、もっと頭の悪い御領エジの連中が罠にはまるのを見物しに来たってことさ。He waved one of his arms casually in some sort of signal. Where did all these people come from? よくもまあこれだけの人数を集めたもんだ。風体からすると薩摩の連中だな。薩摩だと。I heard Mickey dubiously mumble from a distant location. 不意打ちのような真似をしたことは詫びましょう。だが、我々も一応は判明に従う責務がありましてね。薩摩の判明かよ。お前はともかく、白縫は長州に関係してるんじゃなかったか？ご主人様を見限って薩摩についたってんなら笑うとこだけどな。それがな、今や薩摩と長州は仲良し小良しらしくてな。んなことより、てめえらの心配をしたらどうだ？ As Shiranui spoke, the men behind him began to inch forward.
I reached for my sword, but Harada stopped me.
壁を背にして俺の後ろにいろ。一歩でも近づくやつは俺が片っ端から倒してやる。
From the rest of the Shinsengumi, I heard the sounds of hands tightening on hilts and swords being loosened in the scabbards. I swallowed.
どういうことか説明しろ。お前らが薩摩藩の手の者だって言うんなら、どうして俺たちまで取り囲んでやがるんだ。
ああ、お前らが伊藤派とかいう連中か。坂本の件じゃ世話になったらしいな。
Did he mean the assassination of Ryoma Sakamoto? Then, were the Satsuma and the guard allies?
んじゃま、ご苦労さん。礼は言ったから、とっとと死んでくれや。
ミキ君、危ない！おい、しっかりしろ！
Miki went to the body of one of his men, but the man seemed to be dead already. He glared at Shiranui, seething with contempt.
ずいぶんな真似をしてくれるじゃないか。裏切るつもりか、薩摩藩！
ああ？そういうお前らは昔の仲間を裏切ったんだろうが。坂本暗殺は新選組の原田の仕業ですって噂を広めてな。
やっぱりそうか。つまらねえ噂を流してくれやがったのはてめえらだったんだな。
お前らはもう用済みってこった。口封じのためにはお前ら全員殺しちまうのが一番簡単だろ。
なんだと。
Both Shinsengumi and guard were only moments from attacking when Amagiri's voice echoed across the street.
この戦力差で戦うのはおすすめしませんね。時に新選組の方々、一つ提案があるのですが。
なんだ。
そこにいる娘をこちらに預けるつもりはありませんか。そうしていただければ皆さん方のことは見逃しましょう。
おい天桐、勝手なことを抜かすな。そいつとて新選組。
Amagiri stopped the Satsuma vessel just by glaring back at him with a furious gaze.
勘違いしてもらっては困ります。判明には可能な限り従うつもりですが、私にとってはそれが第一ではありません。
しかし。
Gunshot resounded again. The Satsuma vessel fell to the ground and he was no longer moving. Shiranui blew the smoke from his gun as it slowly rose from the barrel.
まだ何か言いたいことがあるやつはいるか？この弾をぶち込まれてまだ生きてられたら聞いてやるよ。
How could he? To Shiranui, there were no enemies or allies. He was a beast that the Satsuma had only just learned they could not control.
静かになったところで答えを聞きましょう。我々の提案を受け入れるか否か。
Not even a breath disturbed the silence of Aburano Koji. The demons, the Satsuma, the guard, and the Shinsengumi all waited to see how I would respond. I...
だとよ、佐野。どうする？
聞くまでもねえだろ。奴らのザレ言なんて信用できるか。平助の冗談の方がまだ可愛げがあるぜ。
いいねいいね、その強がり。じゃあこの数を突破できるのかよ、お前ら。
At a motion from Shiranui, the Satsuma rushed forward, a solid wave of men and swords that tumbled over the Shinsengumi and guards alike. I tried to negotiate with the demons. 待って。
あ？ようやくこっちに来る気になったか？
Even as skilled as they were, there was no way Harada and Hakuoki could fight off all the men the Satsuma had brought. And if Amagiri and Shiranui fought as well... If I go with you, then you'll leave everyone else alone?
己の身と引き換えに仲間を助けるか。いい心がけだぜ。けどな。
What are you doing?
俺たちは後ろの奴らを全滅させてからお前を連れ帰っても問題ねえんだよ。
But you said...
ああ、確かに見逃すって言ってたな。天霧の旦那はな。
You monster! He never meant to let the Shinsengumi go. He'd only wanted to see how I would react. You...
やれやれ。知らぬいにも困ったものですね。鬼は約束を破らないというのを信条としているはずですが。
俺は今を生きる鬼なんだな。
You're disgusting!
なんだ？怒ってんのか？しゃあねえな。俺もまるっきり話がわからねえってわけじゃねえ。原田、お前のことはまあまあ気に入ってるから取引してやろうじゃねえか。
なんだと？
その女をどんな目に合わせてもいいから俺たちのことだけは助けてほしいってこの俺様に頭を下げるなら考えてやるよ。
Harada's eyes moved towards me. I looked over at him now and he flashed me a brilliant smile.
さっきのはかっこよかったぜ。自分が犠牲になるから他の人を助けてくださいなんてセリフ、実際なかなか言えるもんじゃねえ。ただ、もう少し俺たちのことを信頼してくれてもいいんじゃねえか。
Harada laughed fearlessly. At last, he turned to face Shiranui. The crowd of Satsuma soldiers shrank back but before his furious gaze. Glare. Bloop.
来やがれ！こいつを引き渡して生き延びるぐらいなら、お前らを道連れに果ててやるよ！新選組10番組組長の首、そうやすやすと取れると思うな。
Harada.
かっこつけやがって。おい、ヘスケ！何をボサッと突っ取ってやがる！この状況で佐野だけにかっこつけさせる気か！
Heisuke grinned, ran a hand through his hair and stared towards us. And started towards us.
たく新八さんも佐野さんも前からそうだったよな。喧嘩の時はよ、いつもこうなんだ。俺の都合なんて全然関係なしに呼びつけやがってさ。
おいおい、そりゃお互い様だろ。俺だって何度呼び出されたかわからねえぜ。
けど今回はとびっきりすぎだっての。なんせ尊王とか裁くとか思想信条まで全部無視して人を呼びつけちまうんだからな。
With the last word, Heisuke stood next to us, facing Amagiri and Shiranui. He flashed me a grin, and the melancholy boy I had seen only minutes ago was gone. In his place was the Heisuke I'd known.
しょうがねえから手伝ってやるよ。新八ちゃんや佐野さんはともかくこいつを見捨てるわけにはいかねえしな。
腹くくるのが遅えんだよ、このおバカ野郎！
I wasn't sure why, but when we were completely surrounded by enemies, and as we felt like we were evenly matched, the men made me feel confident that we'd come out fine as long as I stayed by their side. Nah, Heisuke. When this is all over, can't you come back to the Shinsengumi? I understand you made this decision after a lot of careful considerations, but everyone misses you.
ああ、考えとく。なんつっても佐野さんも新八さんも俺がいないとダメすぎだからな。
His response was the happiest words I've heard in a while.
こうやって3人で喧嘩すんのも久しぶりだな。
エスケ、腕はなまってねえだろうな。伊藤さんのとこじゃどうせへりくつのこね方ぐらいしか学んでなかったんだろ。
佐野さんや新八さんに心配されるほど落ちぶれてねえよ。
They laughed just the way I'd heard them do so many times before. Even in a street full of enemies, watching them made me feel almost safe. The sight of him made my heart feel so warm. Harada. I meant to say that things had worked out. He just grinned at me and gripped his spear a little tighter.
敵は鬼2匹に雑魚が大勢か。さて、犬猿キジで桃太郎を守って鬼退治としゃれ込むか。
With that, the battle began. Countless Satsuma poured into the narrow street in an attempt to choke us out with sheer numbers. Nogakura's sword flickered and leapt, utterly unconcerned with any odds. Unconcerned? Yeah, unconcerned with any odds.
ぞろぞろと数だけは揃いやがって。死にてえやつからかかってきやがれ。
Blood spurts and screams came from everywhere.
くそ、お前らごときに殺されてたまるか。
The battle was so intense that I couldn't keep up with who was battling whom.
おとなしくそこのガキを差し出して命乞いでもすりゃよかったのによ。楽に死ねると思うんじゃねえぞ。
やめとけよ知らぬい。この状況じゃむやみに撃っても味方の被害が増えるだけだぜ。
狙いをつけられねえじゃねえか。役に立たねえ上に邪魔なんだよてめえら。
He kicked out furiously at a nearby Satsuma soldier who had the misfortune to stumble into Shiranui's line of fire. This is just... wow. I knew Nagakura, Harada, and Heisuke were skilled swordsmen, but I'd never seen them fight the way they did that night. Several of the Shinsengumi soldiers made a wall around me, and I watched as the captains tossed foes aside like they were made of straw. Then from across the battlefield, I heard Amagiri's basso rumble. Basso rumble? Shouldn't it be bass rumble?
単身私に挑んでくるとは勇気だけは褒めておきましょう。
It has become too warm. The AC is on.
あいにくこっちは人手不足でな。嫌でも俺に付き合ってもらうぜ。
1対1でも私に勝てなかったあなたがさらに不利なこの状況で何をなそうというのです。はっ！
Even swords weren't enough to stop Amagiri's fists, and Heisuke with his small frame was driven back.
チェスト!
The Satsuma pressed in, looking for an advantage. No, he's surrounded! Heisuke's plight distracted me from my own, which was a mistake I regretted almost immediately. Before I realized what was happening, 2 Satsuma soldiers burst through the Shinsengumi line, charging straight toward me.
Abune!
No one was close enough to intercept them, and I was nowhere near strong enough to fight off 2 men on my own. They were closer now. No time to dodge. I heard the wet slice of 2 blades cutting into human flesh. It doesn't hurt? When I looked up, the soldiers were dead. A sword pierced the chest of one, straight through the heart, and the other had taken a wakizashi through the throat. I spun towards Heisuke across the street.
なんとか間に合ったみてえだな。
He was smiling. His arms still extended from throwing his swords, and he grinned like he was happy to see me safe. Throwing his swords across the street with that damn accuracy is... holy shit. Something. Heisuke... why did you do that? He'd never even stopped to consider if my life was worth his own.
見上げた度胸です。
Amagidi's fist moved horribly, painfully slow. Horribly, painfully slow. That's a sentence.
だが、愚かだ。
Without his swords, Heisuke had no way to block, and his throw had left him no room to dodge. My ragged scream echoed across the battlefield.
Heisuke! Oi! Heisuke!
くそ！てめえ！どけやがれ！
くそ、なんだこいつらの強さは。退却だ。引け引け。
なんだ撤退かよ。今回は雑魚どものせいで銃も使えねえしな。しょうがねえか。
Harada's blade became a snarling, monstrous whirlwind of death, and before it, the Satsuma and their demon allies were pushed back until they finally withdrew.
くそ、この場は引くぞ。今夜のことは決して忘れん。お前たち新選組の奴らは全員地獄に叩き落としてやるからな。
Miki and the remaining Guardian soldiers all scrambled to their feet and ran. But all of that seemed so far away for me. The street of Aburano Koji was painted with red. Everything before my eyes seemed to melt into together, coalescing into deep pools of blood. Sad noises. My hands were smeared with blood. The words Heisuke coughed out were red.
どじっちまった。
バカ、喋んな。やべえぞ、この傷は。もしかしたら内臓が。
Harada, his injury. Let me see it. I ran over to Heisuke to check up on him. I was praying to myself that it'd be fine. Even if it looked bad, it couldn't be serious, right? It's not as if a strike like that was gonna be fatal to someone like Heisuke. I've repeated these things over and over in my mind. I mean...
くそ！おい、ヘイスケ！ こんなとこで死ぬんじゃねえよ。
Was he really going to die? No, no, you can't die, Heisuke! I just couldn't get myself to believe this. But when I saw it unfold in front of me, I realized I couldn't deny what was happening. I was shivering, but I reached out to wipe the blood desperately from his cheek. His eyes were rolling back into his head, but he looked up at me, shaken and cold.
お前のこともっと守ってやりたかったのにな。かっこ悪い。
No, Heisuke, I wasn't ever so important that you should have given your life to protect me. So please, save your strength.
大丈夫。心配すんな。
とりあえず豚書に運ぶぞ。ここじゃどうしようもねえ。走れるな。
Of course. We ran through the night, Nagakura and Harada bearing Heisuke's bloody and beaten body back to the Shinsengumi. Every minute felt like an hour, and with every second my heart felt that much closer to tearing in half. The assassination of Ito-san and the destruction of the Guardians of the Imperial Tomb was later known as the Aburano Koji incident. That scene... Look, we saw it last route, because it was Heisuke's route, and now we get to see it again, 2 in a row, and it doesn't hurt any less, because it's the good boy. In this house, we appreciate Heisuke. Both the Shinsengumi and the guard were surprised by the sudden appearance of Satsuma troops, and by the demons who accompanied them. Both parties had fallen for the Satsuma trap, and the battlefield was thrown into confusion. During the fight, Heisuke was mortally wounded, and had no choice but to drink the water of life and become a fury or die. As the Battle of Aburano Koji was taking place, the headquarters of the Shinsengumi came under attack from Chikage Kazuma. The monstrous thing my father had made was slowly devouring the Shinsengumi. How long before the water of life swallowed them whole?